A massive military strike shatters the Middle East. And as bombs are falling on Iran's nuclear facilities, a totally different kind of explosion is happening. It's happening online, it's happening in communities all across the globe. It's an explosion of fear, of prophecy, and it all boils down to one terrifying question that's blurring the line between modern war and ancient apocalypse. So, what is really going on here? Let's break it all down. Okay, so let's set the scene. The date is February 28th, 2026. This is a moment that is going to be absolutely etched into history. You have to understand, this wasn't some slow, simmering conflict that finally boiled over. No, this was a sudden, coordinated, and frankly, shocking event that completely changed the balance of power in the Middle East in just a matter of hours. And just look at how fast this all went down. At 3:38 p.m. Eastern Time, President Donald Trump gives the green light for the U.S. operation, which they're calling Operation Epic Fury. By 9:45 a.m. Iran time, the first bombs from this joint U.S.-Israeli attack are already hitting their targets. And then, in less than an hour, maybe one of the most significant strikes of the entire conflict. The compound of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, is completely destroyed. This leads to his assassination, and it creates this enormous power vacuum right at the very heart of the Iranian regime. So, who are the key players in this thing, and what do they actually want? Let's take a closer look at the geopolitical battlefield, because this is way more complicated than just a simple two-sided war. Okay, so on one side, you've got the United States and Israel. Their stated goals are crystal clear. They want to dismantle Iran's nuclear and missile programs for good, and they're aiming for regime change. And they're not alone. They're getting key intelligence and logistical support from allies like the UK, France, and Canada. On the other side, you have Iran and what it calls its axis of resistance. Now, this isn't a traditional army. Think of it more as a network of really powerful proxy groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon or the Houthis in Yemen. They're all fighting for one thing: the survival of the Iranian regime and pushing back against American and Israeli influence in the region. Now, listen to this quote, because the framing here is absolutely crucial. The official justification from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu presents this military action not as an attack, but as a liberation. He says it's about helping the Iranian people take their destiny into their own hands. This kind of language is a huge part of the information war. It's about casting this whole operation as support for an internal uprising, not an external invasion. But underneath all the military strategy and the geopolitical chess moves, there's another story being told. A much older one. For a lot of people, those falling bombs aren't just acts of war. They're being seen as signs of something much bigger. And right there, that's the question. While the physical war is raging, a different kind of war is spreading, a war of consciousness. And it's all being fueled by that one central, absolutely terrifying question. For millions of people, this isn't just about politics or nuclear weapons. It's about the end of days and the possible arrival of a figure known as the Dajjal. So who or what is the Dajjal? Well, in Islamic end times tradition, he is the ultimate deceiver. He's this figure of immense power who is supposed to show up right before the final judgment, performing what look like miracles and leading all of humanity astray. His arrival is considered one of the major signs of the apocalypse. So you can see why linking a war to his name sparks such an intense, visceral fear. Okay, so this brings us to the most crucial point we have to unpack. Is this conflict really the fulfillment of a prophecy, or are we just watching a very carefully calculated act of 21st century politics that's just been wrapped in the language of apocalypse? We need to untangle these two threads. Let's look at 3 vital points that really help separate the facts from the fear. First, a really core theological point. Mainstream Islamic scholarship is very clear that no human government, no group can summon or bring out the Dajjal. That timing is known only to God. Second, there's the political reality. Strategic analysts are pretty much in agreement. This is a war driven by cold, hard national interests. Nuclear weapons, regional dominance, it's not a religious crusade. And third, and this is the wild, modern twist, this is being called the first major AI war. We're seeing AI-generated fakes and disinformation designed specifically to prey on religious beliefs and make this conflict feel like a prophecy coming true. And this table really gets to the heart of a huge misunderstanding. Iran's axis of resistance is not the same as a caliphate movement like ISIS, not even close. Iran's alliance is based on a nation-state trying to survive and project power. ISIS, on the other hand, wants to erase all borders and rule over all Muslims under one leader. Their goals, their structures, even who they consider their enemies, it's all fundamentally different. Now, this idea, this image of a unified Islamic world all rising up together against the West, it's probably one of the biggest misconceptions about this entire conflict. The reality on the ground tells a very, very different story. Far from uniting against the US and Israel, many Muslim-majority nations have actually been direct targets of Iran's aggression. I mean, look at this. Iran has launched hundreds of drones and missiles at its own neighbors. They've hit embassies, airports, and military bases in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, and Qatar. These countries aren't lining up with Iran. They're actively fighting to protect their own people and their own land from it. And just look at the sheer scale of this defense. In just the first few days of the conflict, the UAE detected over 800 Iranian drones headed their way, and they successfully intercepted nearly 93% of them. That is not the action of an ally. That's a nation under attack, using its own sophisticated air defenses to protect itself. So all of this really points to a new reality, a new face of war. The modern battlefield, it's not just a physical place anymore. The fight for the narrative, the struggle to manipulate belief itself, that has become every bit as critical as controlling the skies. Okay, so let's tie this all together. What should you take away from this? First, this is a geopolitical war, plain and simple, driven by things like nuclear deterrence and the desire for regime survival. It is not an attempt to kickstart a religious prophecy. Second, the Islamic world is not one single thing. It's deeply divided, and many of its nations are actively defending themselves from Iran. And crucially, those ancient religious fears we talked about, they are being deliberately used as weapons in a new kind of information war. The real struggle here is for the future of Iran's government and who controls the Middle East. Which leaves us with one final, and honestly pretty unsettling thought. We're living in an age where artificial intelligence can create convincing lies, convincing fakes in an instant, and those lies can tap directly into our deepest held beliefs and our greatest fears. So we have to ask ourselves, have we entered a new era of conflict where the main target isn't land or resources but truth itself? Is a human mind the next great battlefield?